Welcome everybody to the Secret Origins panel at Emerald City Comic Con. I am pleased to introduce Ethan Van Sciver to the stage. Come on up, Ethan.
Can you hear me? Is it on? Yeah, it's on.
So the name of the panel.
Let me have my Marco Rubio moment.
Is this me? So how did you feel about Marco Rubio's response?
I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you watching it at the time?
No. I just saw it later, and
You
it was
appreciated
amusing.
the move to the water? The move to the water was intense.
It was
Come
bizarre, but his reaction to it later, setting out a brand of Rubio water,
Yes.
was good.
Well played.
Yeah.
So this is Secret Origins. So let's talk a little bit about your secret origin to get started.
Oh, of me?
You personally.
Okay.
Yeah. How were you born? Were you born in a hospital or home birth? Or
We're going to go all the way back to that.
Back to the beginning.
Yeah.
How far back can you trace your DNA?
Dutch Van Sciver family came over on the Mayflower, and
Is that true?
that is true.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
actually,
name,
yeah. My name is Dutch. It means from Schiffa, which is a town in Holland. And I guess in the 1600s, my family came over and settled New Jersey, so it's our fault.
Oh, geez. You did this.
Sorry about that. And yeah, there's still, like, if you go to New Jersey, there's still Van Sciver Parkway, Van Sciver Elementary School,
Oh, wow.
and things like that.
And
yeah.
those are all people directly related to you, or from your town?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. They're my. There's a Van Sciver furniture company in Camden, which is where I grew up, and those were I guess they're my cousins, my great cousin. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Wow. Everybody in Camden, go to Van Sciver Furniture.
I think it's been closed down for 100 years, but
well, that's too bad.
you can still get Van Sciver furniture on eBay.
Can you get on eBay?
Yeah,
All
which
right,
is
good.
interesting.
I think we just increased the value.
Yes.
That's interesting. So was their name Van Sciver in Schiffa, or was that
It
like
was
an
it was
Ellis
Van
Island? Oh, it was before
Schiffa,
Ellis
and then
Island,
it's
right.
one of those Ellis Island things where I'm sure they say, "What's your name?" Van Schiffa,
right.
and to a New Yorker, that's Van Sciver.
Right.
New York accent.
This is amazing.
So
Okay, so now let's cut a little bit to the future.
there you go.
You always wanted to be in comics, always wanted to be an artist?
No, I always loved superheroes with all my heart. Ever since I saw the Christopher Reeve Superman movie,
Okay.
which was when I was 3 years old,
Oh, wow.
that opened my eyes to superheroes. And then from there, I'd watch the Super Friends cartoon.
Uh-huh.
My mom made me a reversible Superman Batman cape.
Hot.
So it was Superman on one side and then flip it, Batman on the other, be on my big wheel,
Did you have the Batman big wheel?
No, I just had a red and yellow big wheel. This was 1978, so
Okay.
they didn't really have
They weren't
cooler
merchandising
big wheels. They had
yeah.
Slinkies, and they had big wheels, and they had Silly Putty, and that's the only toys they had, really. This dude, you know what? I remember from my birthday, the Mego is, by the way, the worst toy company ever.
Oh, come on.
Mego, they're seriously
like the Barbie of superheroes.
no, they're the worst effing toy company that's ever been. They're so weird. Not just their superhero figures, because those were pretty good, even though they were odd. like Superman was excessively tan and swarthy looking.
Yeah,
if
which
you
is
look
a
at
good
that,
look for him, though. Come
bizarre. All right, so Mego was making all these awful toys like ball. Wait, what is it? You're a ball buster. Yeah, that's what it was.
on. Wow.
Do you remember Ball Buster? You don't.
No.
Okay. I swear to God, this is true. If you don't believe this, then we can just, you're not going to believe anything I say. In the 1970s, Mego made a game called Ball Buster, and it was a board game, and it basically it was like Chinese checkers, except there were long pegs that were flexible, little plastic balls in the end, and then you'd sort of try to manipulate, and if you could sort of get your opponent a certain way, and smack. And the commercial has like a husband and a wife playing together, and the wife pulls back and smacks him, and he goes, "You're a ball buster," and she looks at the camera and gives one of those. That's Mego. So weird.
Oh, wait, that's not awesome? I don't
Mego made
understand.
Walton's action figures.
Oh, jeez.
In case you want to act out your Depression era fantasies, Mego has Walton's action figures. But anyway, Mego made a really bizarre toy that I still think about, and I wish I had it because I got it for my birthday, and it was a Superman sprinkler.
Okay.
Now, what was interesting about this is that I don't know why it didn't horrify me as a kid. It was like something out of Game of Thrones. It was a large spike, and at the top top was Superman's head. This was red, but it was just Superman's head. There was no S on it. There was no cape hanging down. It was just Superman's head on a pike, and it spit water out of its mouth. And I lent it to a kid, and a kid broke it, and I've been mourning that toy ever since, and wondering, like, who designed that and whose idea that was. It was the worst thing ever. The family of the kid who broke it came over with a replacement.
Okay.
It was Donald Duck.
Oh, that's not fair.
Donald Duck's
unjust.
head on a spike. So
Which is more tragic.
that's another thing I'm looking for on eBay.
You're looking for the Superman sprinkler?
Superman
Anyone
sprinkler.
out there on the internet or at the audience has a Superman sprinkler?
Send it to me.
you can
The
feel
child
the heart
inside
a
of me.
wounded Child.
Yeah.
So always a superhero fan. as a
Always,
child.
always. And I didn't really.
Were you a DC kid always? Batman,
Yes,
Superman?
yes, yeah. Didn't read comic books. I think I mostly used them as silly putty fodder. Like, because
yeah.
that, again, we were talking about silly putty. And one of my dad's friends, my dad painted Jimmy Osmond's house in the 1970s. I grew up in Provo, Utah, all right? My dad was painting houses. And so I remember crawling around the Osmond brothers' home. And Jimmy Osmond gave me $1. And he said, buy a treat. You know, I think he meant Twinkies or something. And that was my choice. We went to like Sears, I remember, right after that, and I don't know why. But they had a rack of those 3 packs of comics in plastic. Do you remember those?
Yeah, yeah.
3 assorted comics. And the 2 on the outside were Superman. And the one on the inside was Winnie the effing Pooh.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they get you. But the 2 on the outside that you could see were Superman comics. And I bought those with my $1.
And you're not a Pooh fan. You're a Buffy
I just looked at it. I remember reading this and going, why is there a Winnie the Pooh? Even at age 4 or whatever I was. What the hell is this? And then it was Superman for me. Superman was my hero. And I didn't really read comics, like actually read them and understand them. I picked up Superman Man of Steel #1 in 1987.
Okay.
John Byrne.
Mhm.
And I read it, and it changed my life. And I knew then, because then I started looking for 75 cents everywhere, you know, because comics were 75 cents. I needed 3/4 so that I could go to the drugstore. The other option was to shoplift them,
Right.
which was easy to do, okay? Because this was the drugstore on the corner, and they had Playboy magazine laid out here, and I was in 2nd grade, and I'm like, a little curious, you know, opening them up, and then a dude comes out from the back, those are for you. And I ran my ass home, you know. And then I didn't feel so bad when, you know, in 3rd grade, I'd bring a book bag in and sit down in front of the comic rack while they were in the back smoking dope. You know, slip a couple in there.
Payback for chasing you away from the Playboy?
That's right.
Well, you
How
know.
dare they? And yeah,
What's the statute of limitations on
I know. Could I be arrested now? I don't know.
All right.
I'll go willingly for that, honestly, because it was worth it. And
that was Man of Steel.
no, that was later because I became obsessed with comic books.
Okay.
And I had to just have more and more. And I read them multiple times, and I kept them in a shoebox, slightly folded, you know, and just had a collection that I was just obsessed with. And I bought everything. I became a Marvel fan. That was first, because I think what happens is, as a child, you love the DC superheroes because you just identify with the colors and the righteousness and the simplicity, the basic, awesome simplicity of the DC heroes. And then when you're a teenager and you're listening to heavy metal, you know, DC's lame. Oh. I like guys that say, "What's up, bub?" Your funeral and cut each other, you know. I like it when superheroes sit on a wall and cry in the rain. That's why I like Marvel. But I grew out of it, you know. And when I started working in comics, because my first book was Cyberfrog. 13, I realized I'm going to draw comics for a living. My childhood fantasy was to be a paleontologist. Walt Simonson did both. Okay, but I wanted to do one of the.
Late.
No, I'm not smart enough. I found out that I was stupid, but
So good at comics.
Right. So I'm too dumb to do paleontology, but just smart enough. Maybe too smart to do comics. Should I say that? There you go.
We've made news.
So anyway, yeah, started doing this comic book called Cyberfrog, and then I was working for Harris Comics, and all of the DC freelancers used to come into Harris, and I'd be around Vampirella and my little book Cyberfrog and everything, and that was cool. We were professionals and we were making money, and it was really cool.
And this is like the early 90s?
95, 96,
Okay.
yeah. But then every now and then somebody like Chris Batista would come in, and Chris Batista had worked on Steel, you know, and that made him fucking cool. Like it made him a grown-up because he worked at DC. And it was always like, one day when I'm good enough, I'm gonna work at DC. But for now, I'm gonna, you know, cut my teeth on Cyberfrog at Harris. And they were paying me really well, and it was fun.
That's a good time.
I met everybody, you know, in the industry, and was just starting to understand how the business worked. And I got my own apartment in Portland, Oregon. It was like $500 a month. And, you know, my first, one of those one-bedroom first apartments right here it actually was in Milwaukee, Oregon. So not too far from here. And I guess Cyberfrog sales, because the 90s kind of skid to a halt. I mean, it was scary. And they said, well, you can do Cyberfrog monthly for us now, but you're going to do it at a third of your rate.
Oh.
And I went, okay, I better bust these things out. And I did that for about 2 months and realized I was going to get evicted from my little apartment. I just couldn't even feed myself on that. So desperately, I decided it was time to go work at DC. And I'd heard through the grapevine, because you establish connections. That's the important thing about, you know, being in comics and trying to move around, is you should know other people and then kind of hear through the grapevine what's going on in case there are creative shifts. You should meet editors and know them. I heard that Craig Rousseau on Impulse might be leaving. And so I was like, I can draw Impulse. You know I can do that. So I called the editor and just said, yeah, I'm the Cyberfrog guy. I'd kind of like to come over. He immediately assigned me a Wonder Girl pinup, which was the coolest thing ever. With DC package comes from FedEx with like the DC paper, a voucher, and reference, and then like a deadline. And I worked my butt off on that Wonder Girl pinup. It's terrible. I mean, if you look at it now, it's awful. It was in a Wonder Woman Secret Files book, but that was my first DC work. And
they got you in the door?
Yeah, that got me in the door. I was pleasant. I was easy to work with. I took a couple of Impulse short stories, a couple of pinups, Plastic Man pinup back then, and then they let me do an Impulse fill-in, and then gave me the book, and that was it. And I started, and there was another kid my age that was starting too that very same month, Jeff Johns.
Who's that?
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. We became friends right away.
So you guys started the same month?
Pretty much, yeah. He was doing Day of Justice, and he was going to start Stars and Stripe. And we did a crossover that I was supposed to draw, but the timing didn't quite work out. So we were always like, let's do something together after this. And that turned out to be Flash Iron Heights.
So you start working at DC. There's another guy that comes in. How would you meet him? Is it in the DC offices, at comps?
You'd get comp boxes, and let's see. How did I even meet Jeff? I know I met him face to face in the office when he was doing Stars and Stripe. But more than that, there was a lot of computer interaction, and then, you know, hey, I like your book, oh, I like your work, and then we'd talk on the phone and everything, and I don't know, it's just so lucky, you know?
Yeah.
To be in the right place at the right time.
And so how soon did you guys start working together?
Well, Impulse became unmanageable for a bunch of different reasons. Like the writer was fighting with the editor, and when that happens, you know, as the artist, I don't fight with anybody, you know, really. I'm cool, just give me my script. But when there's a creative clash like that, it's the worst place to be in. So I kind of just walked off of the book, and, you know, politely, as I'm wont to do, and did a Justice League one-shot while Jeff wrote Flash Iron Heights. And what it was, you know, Jeff was writing, Day of Judgment was not a big hit for him, and Stars and Stripe was, it was good, but it was cartoony, and it wasn't really, you know, and I'm doing Impulse, which was cartoony too. And we're like, this really isn't us, you know? Right. Like, really, we're dark and sick inside. So I remember getting on the phone with him and just being like, let's create, instead of doing other Flash villains, Jeff had the idea for a prison, like an Arkham Asylum style prison for Flash, and he had this name Iron Heights. and we got on the phone and we created Murmur together, which was so cool. You know, it's like he had the name Murmur, and I said something like, okay, so like this guy, he has like some sort of Tourette's syndrome that makes him confess his murders. And so he cuts his own tongue out and sews his mouth shut, just anything to shut himself up, you know. And Barry Allen is the guy who puts him away. You know, as a cop, he testifies and puts Murmur in prison, and then Murmur gets out and whatever it was. And we just created a whole pantheon of new Flash villains together. And when you're working with another a collaborator who you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
work together, so you get each other. And Jeff and I just got each other right away. And I would say something and he would build on it, and, you know, I would do sketches, and it was just exciting. And so this Flash Iron Heights book came out that didn't look like or resemble either of our work, really, at the time. Came out to critical acclaim and extremely poor sales, which really bummed us out. Because I guess Flash wasn't really selling all that well. And so a Flash $6, you know, prestige format is what they used to call them, prestige format book, people weren't looking for it.
And so you'd both been doing cartoony type comic books right before that. How did you know to connect that you guys both had a really dark
Because we talked. I mean, we just talked, and we liked the same movies, and we just had the same kind of ideas. I mean, for me, Impulse was quite simply, I looked at Humberto Ramos and Craig Rousseau and said, I can ape these guys' style fairly easily. I'm not a competent enough and really tuned in artist. I have this style that I sort of have in my heart that I'm not ready to give yet, but I can easily do this cartoony stuff. That was my sort of attitude. It's kind of young and pompous, like, because Humberto Ramos was amazing, and you know, cartooning is not a simple thing to do, but it seemed more simple to me to do that than what Phil Jimenez does at the time. So, and Jeff was doing a tribute to his sister, who had passed away on Flight 800, and so he created this character named Courtney, which was his sister's name, and Stars and Stripes meant something to him. It was humorous and everything, and it was a tribute to his sister. But deep inside, you know, it's like he wanted the Flash, he wanted Batman, he wanted these, you know, he was seething with ambition. We both were, you know.
And so you decide that you want to do this darker Flash book together. So what's it like, two young guys doing lighter fare at DC to go in and pitch doing a prestige book?
It was a relief. And
but I mean, going to DC.
oh, what did
getting
DC
the
say?
deal. Yeah.
DC was cool about it. They were just like, I think Jeff had been given the Flash series anyway, and maybe we started Flash Iron Heights before or at the same time he started his run on Flash. But I think the first 4 issues with Angel Unzueta as artist were coming out, and then Flash Iron Heights came out as maybe his 5th issue or something like that. So he already had the Flash reigns, and saying, we want to do a prestige format. DC wanted to do prestige format properties. They were making money for them somehow. But then Flash Iron Heights came out, and it sold 15,000 copies. You know, in the year 2000, we were like mortified. But then those books are impossible to find and expensive now. So.
Right. And so coming off of Iron Heights.
Coming off of Iron Heights, I realized, boy, I'm having a great time, and I got this bright idea. I'm gonna send this stuff over to Marvel and see what they think of my Iron Heights pages. And I told Jeff, I'm going to Marvel. Jeff's like, cool, I'll go too. I'll go with you. And so I was like, all right. So I sent, you know, I figured X-Men for some reason. I can't remember if I was tipped off about X-Men. Like if I called Marvel and said, hey, I'm thinking about coming over, and they said you should check the X office. But what have you, you know, however it went, I ended up talking to the X-Men editors, and they were like, we need a fill-in artist for this thing that you may have seen already announced. It's Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely doing X-Men. And I remember looking at the art and going, wow, this doesn't look like any X-Men that I've ever seen before. They had these big puffy yellow Kevlar jackets, and they looked really cool, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so they're like, you know, Frank Quitely's slow, so he can only do about 10 issues a year, right? You're going to do the other 2. And then you say you're slow too. I'm like, I can do 6 issues a year of this new style that I'm doing. So I'll do 2 new X-Men issues and then 4 of this other thing, like a mini series. And I started talking to Jeff about Jean Grey. And we started developing Phoenix, like this 4-issue Phoenix miniseries that was going to delve into her origin story in a new way and explain that like the Phoenix entity was actually, they mentioned this briefly in early X-Men issues. Jean Grey had a little friend named Annie that she was close to, very close to, and she was hit by a car and died in Jean's arms. And that's when Jean's psychic powers manifested themselves because she heard Annie, and she just kind of went catatonic, and Professor Xavier had to rescue her. You know, her parents brought her to Xavier's school, and Xavier said, fixed her. Now, something happened there, right? I mean, you read that story and you go, there's a big missing story there.
Right.
So Jeff and I were talking, and I remember the story was Annie and Jean were both had the same mutant powers. And so when Annie was dying, her little entity went into Jean, whatever her soul was, it went into Jean, and now Jean was fighting off these two personalities. And what Professor X did, essentially, was remove Annie and put her in some sort of psychic lockbox. And so when the space shuttle came down in that famous Dave Cockrum X-Men issue, and you know, she came out as Phoenix, that was Annie unleashed. Annie got out of the box and was the Phoenix Force, essentially. So Jean and Annie together became this super powerful cosmic thing. And this was the very DC universe style thing that we would have done. Like DC would have eaten that up. That, oh, you're going to build our characters for us and make it make more sense and answer questions and everything, like we did with Green Lantern. You know, it's like, great, do it. Marvel was more hesitant because they were like, those old stories, nobody remembers them. So Marvel seemed to be less interested in their own history, I think, than DC is, which turned me off. You know, I was like, well, there's no point in trying to build on what came before. With Batman, you could say every little aspect of Detective 27, every aspect of that origin story is another piece of something worth exploring. What happened to the gun that shot, you know, Thomas and Martha Wayne? There's a story there, right? And just a ton of little things that you can just pull from that origin story and make it into something bigger and make it into something that explains who Bruce Wayne is a little bit more. Marvel was a little bit more like, but okay.
Was it a fear of going into the canon, or was it a fear of...
Yeah. Right. And to me, it just seemed like, look, all these pieces fit together like this. It makes sense. Right. And then Jean would be mad at Xavier when she found out, finally, this is what you did to my friend, you know, and there would be a rift there. It would be a great conflict. Anyway, that never happened, even though I did a few covers that ended up being used as new X-Men covers with Jean Grey on them, because it turned out that Frank Whiteley couldn't do 8 or 10 issues. They called me and said, hey, he can only do 8. Will you do the other 4? And I'm like, well, that cuts into my 4. Well, he can only do 4. Will you do the other 8? And suddenly it was like, I can't even, not possible. And these Grant Morrison scripts are so involved and so intense that even doing 2 issues in a row was painful. It was because you're just like, I have to do this right. And I'm a young artist and I might be in over my head. So, you know, that happened, and then...
What was it like working on a Grant script coming out?
So scary. But I mean, you know, the thing is, like, you know, I've been working on scripts before that were always good, but they were super heroic, and they weren't ever emotional. The scripts that I had. The first Grant Morrison script that I got was New X-Men 117, and the story was about a little deformed mutant kid named Barnell Bowhusk, who was mockingly called Beak. And he had a prized baseball bat that Hank McCoy had given to him as a gift. And because the other kids were kind of not mean to him, but they left him out, he was kind of isolated, this connection that this poor little child had with Hank McCoy meant the world to him, and thus this baseball bat was, you know, meaningful to him. And hopefully, the book is 12 years old. I hope the audience has read it. I'm not spoiling anything. But at the end of the story, it's revealed that Charles Xavier has been possessed by his evil sister, his malignant narcissist, awful, you know, sadistic twin sister is pretending to be Xavier. And so she reveals herself as Xavier to Beast down in his lab, just when Barnell comes down with his baseball bat, and she takes a hold of Barnell and forces him to beat Hank McCoy nearly to death with it while he screams and cries. And then it cuts away, and Xavier's, in his wheelchair whistling a happy tune, while this is going on. And then you just cut to a panel of Barnell ripping the feathers out of him and just himself, like a parrot does when it's in distress, and just screaming and crying. I remember reading this and just in my lazy boy chair, like, I don't want to draw this. This is so sad, Like, it really made me upset. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I just remember just being like, this is such a big job. And it was just another issue for Grant. Grant writes brilliance. Grant pisses brilliance. So this was just another story to him, but to me it meant the world. And I just, poured my heart into it and did my best. But Marvel was a bad company to work for. In the meantime, they had Jeff, poor Jeff, who came over there because of me, doing Avengers that he wasn't having a good time with. He wrote a mini series about, like, what were the mutants that live in the sewers? Morlocks.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is, this is a waste of time. And so eventually we were able to flee back to DC and did a Hawkman issue and
then all leading up towards Green Lantern.
Green Lantern, yeah.
So tell me about getting started on Green Lantern.
Well, the second thing that I did after the Hawkman issue was something called Batman Catwoman Trail of a Gun, which was written by Annie Nocenti. Mm-hmm. Did you know that Nocenti, she told me this a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
That's just Nocenti. It's Italian for to do harm.
Wow.
I mean, if that isn't like a last name so her parents named her Ann Nocenti, but wanted her to call herself Annie Nocenti because Innocenti means it's innocent. Mm-hmm. Okay, you had the extra to not do harm instead, which I thought was fascinating. But anyway, Annie wrote a two-part, 48 pages. It was 100 pages total. Batman, Catwoman, Trail of a Gun. It was an anti-gun screed, which is hilarious because my wife is an NRA instructor. Mm-hmm. Okay. But my attitude then was just like, look, I'm going to take this on, and my job is just to draw whatever the writer wants and just do the best that I can to put her message across. It doesn't contain me. It's her. So while I was doing that, Dan DiDio, who amazingly, it's so cool how this works out. Dan DiDio worked at Mainframe Animation, and they had a deal to animate my Cyberfrog character into a cartoon. And I went to Vancouver, and I met Dan. And Dan was like, hey, sit down. Let me show you what we got. It was really neat. And then, like, suddenly he's my boss at DC, Yeah. So he already knew who I was and everything. And, it was New York Comic Con or something like that. And I had my pages for Batman, Catwoman. And I said, let me reintroduce myself, and let me just show you what I'm working on for DC right now. And let me just tell you, I'm happy to be here, especially since I just came from Marvel and, like, want to stay here. So please make good use of me, And he looked at these pages that I was working on. I remember he just looked so excited by them, which made me feel great, And he said, come to my office on Monday. This was like a Sunday. Now, I was going to fly back home, after the convention. But I was like, I'm going to stay an extra day and see what Dan's like, I have something for you. And so he took me into his office. He's like, I have the biggest project for you. The biggest project. He's like, popular characters. Everyone loves them. And it's something we're planning. It's top secret, but you're perfect for it. He's like, it's called Identity Crisis. And I was like, okay. And he's like, he pitches it to me and he goes, basically, we're going to rape Jean Loring. And then, and he started telling me this. He's like, it starts with this Silver Age thing, and then it leads to this horrific rape. And then, and I'm like, I trust you, if that's what you say. So I'm sitting there. My wife asked me, like, what did he pitch you? What are you going to do? And I'm like, something about rape? I don't know. Horrified. So.
That's how he pitched it? Really? He brought out, he's like, we're going to rape.
It was like that. He was like, let me explain it. I'm not going to explain it well. I'm not going to do it justice. But as Brad Meltzer, it was like that. And I was shocked by it. But I was friends with Rags Morales, okay? And so for some reason, Rags called me up and said, hey, I'm doing this thing called Identity Crisis. I was like, that's my project. What do you mean? And he's like, no, something about timing and you know, shipping, and you're slower than I am, so they gave me this. They've got something else for you. And sure enough, like an hour later, they called me up and said, how do you feel about Green Lantern?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I never read a Green Lantern book in my life. I don't know, but what is it? And they're like, we're going to bring back Hal Jordan, you and Jeff.
You're like, well, is he going to be raped?
I was like, where is there rape in it? That's what I need to know, just to make sure they're commensurate projects. So, yeah, so I'd never read a Green Lantern book in my life, but I knew that Lantern fans were like Trekkies, like they're devoted to the characters. So I knew because of Heat.
But did you know that it was a big deal for bringing Hal Jordan back? Or?
Oh, yes,
Okay, yeah.
because there was a thing called Heat, back then, Hal's Emerald Advancement Team, that basically tortured Ron Mars while he was telling his Kyle Rayner stories. There was this internet phenom, and they would come to conventions, and they're like, we're Heat, we're Hal's Emerald Advancement Team. Where's Hal? You killed Hal. Who is this guy? Get rid of him, you know? And so we knew that, like, you know, Hal Jordan coming back would be a big deal. Everybody would want it to happen. And we were going to do it in such a way that it wouldn't hurt anyone. We were going to keep Kyle involved. We're going to, you know, Jon Stewart. We're going to take Guy Gardner, who was Warrior then, make him Guy Gardner again, and put him in that great costume. They were telling me, they said, change that costume. And I said, I'm not changing anything about that costume. I'm cutting his hair. That's the only thing I'm doing. And I'm telling you, the reason why I hated Guy Gardner when I would read about him in Justice League is I'd be like, that idiotic haircut, that Mo Howard haircut ruins this character for me. It was never cool. So I just said, you know, if you give him a high and tight, a Marine haircut, that's who he is. He's, you know, I mean, suddenly he'll be cool and everybody will like him. And Jeff said, yeah, you know what? Do it like your haircut. Because at the time I had something like that, you know. And yeah, that was like the right thing to do. Suddenly I loved Guy and everyone else did. And anyway, so we, you know, Green Lantern Rebirth. Most people have read it, right?
There's probably a couple people here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was just an amazing success.
Right.
It
Did
was
you
just
know right away that it was going to be? Did you have any idea it was going to be as big as it was?
Yeah, we did. Like, I mean, you want to say no, you know, but I mean, you know, it was so good. I mean, we just knew it right away. And I'm not talking about my artwork. I'm just talking about the idea behind it and how well done it was, how it explained everything perfectly. And I was just not a Green Lantern fan, so I wasn't hung up by anything else that had come before. And I just started making my own changes, which is what I do. You know, if they let me have the characters, I'm like, you know, his suit's made of energy, then why is it gray? Why does it reflect back light? You know, the black parts need to be solid black because they're the absence of the green, right? And that made the green suddenly go and grow, you know, and pop. Whenever you put the gray there, the green fades back for some reason. But my Green Lantern just glowed. And I was like, you know, since his costume's made of energy, and there are these intergalactic policemen, I was like, Jeff, I'm going to start doing these weird things to his suit. And he's like, go ahead, do it. So I just took the little symbol and went three-dimensional, like that. I just said, this is like a police siren, you know? It's like, when you see, this logo is like, they all have to be consistent, first of all. We got to stop doing variations on the logo, because this logo is like Coca-Cola. I mean, you know what this logo means all over the universe. You see it coming, it means shut the F up. The Green Lantern Corps is there, whatever, you know. It's a flashing siren, essentially. And so I started to think more of them about police officers. Jeff started to think about how their individual personalities would sort of manifest in the way they use their rings. And he said, start thinking about that. And so Jon Stewart, the architect, would start thinking and creating in sort of a bitmap form. Like he started, if he was building something, you'd see the rivets and what he was building and how it was carefully. It took a long time to draw.
Yeah, sure.
But it looks so good.
Now,
when
is
it
that
was,
in the scripts, or is that something that you're doing each time you're, you know, illustrating it?
it would be like, because I'd get the scripts one at a time. So the first one would be like, do something, mess around with the Jon Stewart's aura, you know?
Right.
Like when Jeff said, I think his beam shoots out like in corners, like 90-degree angles. Like that's what he said. And I took that to mean architectural drawings. And then I would sort of kind of, in a frightened kind of way, just sort of do that and then get bolder and bolder with it as he encouraged me until suddenly it was all over him, you know. and the fans just responded to it. And some things worked and some things didn't. Like, I had this idea of Kyle Rayner. This is one thing everyone hated, and I wish I could take it back. Kyle Rayner, the artist, you know. And so, first of all, he's the guy who creates the polar bears and the, you know, the trains and everything, because he can think that way. Like, he, you know, he's very visual. The other guys are more like, just get the job done. They create rough tools to do things with their powers. But Kyle's cute, you know. So I remember drawing a picture of Kyle creating a hand with a giant pencil, sort of sketching this perfect weapon to keep Parallax's mouth open. You know, because he didn't have a clear idea what it is, and so he sketched it like I would. So there's this huge green hand with a pencil drawing on Parallax's mouth, and the fans went, "Stop that right now!" And I went, "Okay, all right, too cute by half. I got it."
So how do you respond to fan reaction?
I listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they say don't. You know, a lot of people say whatever the fans say, do the opposite, because they don't know what they want. They want, you know, what they're telling you they want is the opposite of what they really actually will buy and be compelled by. But it's different for an artist. Like, my Superman has never been good because I love him so much and I can't draw him the way I see him. You know, in my head, he's a real person, you know? Almost like Jesus Christ. Like, you can draw Jesus Christ and it doesn't look like Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ looks like somebody. You know what I mean? Even though we have no idea what he would look like, really. There's an idea of what he looks like. You can get it wrong. And Superman is almost the same way. There's something compassionate and kind in his face, handsome yet strong, with a sense of humor, and all these things. And really, to me, there are only about a dozen artists that can draw Superman well, and the rest of them suck. You know, as a fan, you know, I'm just like, that's not Superman. Sorry, you got it wrong. Guys like Ed McGuinness, excellent. You know, he gets it, even though his style is really cartoony. John Byrne obviously gets it just right. More recently, Gary Frank, because he draws Christopher Reeve. I mean, these are guys that get Superman in a way that, like, I agree with. I've never been that guy. So when they assigned me Superman Batman after Green Lantern Rebirth, my Superman was just torturous to me because I just could not get him right. And the fans were saying, your Superman sucks. I'm like, I know, you know, it's like, I agree, but what am I doing wrong?
You were commenting yourself being like, he sucks.
Yeah, I'm with you, I agree, but give me tips. Like, what am I doing wrong? What do you disagree with?
Wow.
So.
And did that help?
No, because they don't know either, really.
Right.
You know, they know what they don't like and what they disagree with.
But you find that when they comment on your work, that you feel that they do know what they're talking about, that you don't do the opposite of
Some of them, like, listen, when I turn, and all artists are like this, but we know what's wrong with our work. We already know. We turn it in guiltily. There are very few things that, like, I turn in that I'm like, this is perfect. I dare you. I challenge you to tell me anything that's wrong with this.
Do you have some that you turned in? What would you say is something you turned in that you were like?
Flash Rebirth #4. The cover is perfect. It's exactly the way I pictured it. It's a flawless drawing. I would show it to anybody as the perfect example of what I think my art is meant to look like. And then the cover to Flash Rebirth #1, even though it's not a perfect drawing, is the most effective and cool cover I think I've ever done. And they still use it. DC uses it, you know, all over the place. It's like a really, because I mean, when you do Flash covers, you know, how many times can you draw him running, you know, at the camera? It's just, so the idea of actually, I don't remember where I got this, but I just thought, you know, I like this when Superman does it, you know, it just means so much. We open his shirt and it's what's the equivalent with Flash? He runs. I want to see him yank up his boot, you know? And I just thought of Frank Miller's Dark Knight cover where Batman fills the whole thing and he's down, crouched like that. My favorite Batman cover ever, I think. That's what it is. So I wanted to just find the shape of that rectangular shape, and fill it with the Flash yanking up his boot. And I got it just right. So that you look at it and you're just like, and just energy, you know, all over him. Just like a tidal wave of Speed Force. So there are a handful of times where I'm just like, okay, you know, I'm doing the right thing. Like, I deserve this job. This is a job that everybody wants. And so, you know, self-doubt happens all the time.
Sure.
You know, it's good to just get it right and just go, no, I'm in the right place. I earned this.
I want to talk a little bit about Batman. I think that's actually a really interesting place to finish up. But you're on Batman now. You're just talking a little bit about doing Batman Superman and seeing Frank Miller as Batman. Tell me a little bit about doing Batman.
Yeah, Batman is the character that I think if you're shy, everybody wants it. I think everybody wants to work on Batman, but they don't have the nerve to ask for it. I might be projecting, because that's how I
You're
am.
nervous asking?
Yeah, I just kept looking at it and going, guys, can you see how good my Batman is? When are you going to offer me like, I'm good at drawing Batman. Did you see Rebirth and Superman Batman? Okay, I'll see you later. You know? Like, that was my whole thing with DC. And then after Flash Rebirth, I kind of retired for 2 years. I don't know why. I was depressed or bummed out or something, and I just didn't want. I was doing covers and everything, and DC pulled me right back in and just said, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Nothing. We're doing the New 52. What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I'll do Firestorm covers," and then somehow I ended up involved in co-writing, even though I had very little to do with it. Firestorm and just doing the covers, and the book wasn't selling well. And so I just I drew 2 issues of it. Just like maybe my name will help pick it up a little bit. It didn't, okay? But it was fun to draw a comic book again. It just got my heart pumping, and I was really excited. And I just, at that same time, I guess Jeff heard that I was drawing again, and he called me up about this Green Lantern annual, which was just a blast. It was so fun to work with Jeff again. So from there, I just told Dan DiDio, I sent a letter to Dan and Bob and everybody. I just said, "Hey, I'm back, you know. I want Green Lantern, or I want Batman." You know, like big letters. And it's one of those things that just worked out so well, because Dave Finch had just left his Batman book, and Dave Finch is my friend. Like, we're good friends, so I didn't feel bad about taking his book, you know. I asked him and asked for his blessing and everything. And the writer, Greg Hurwitz, had requested me, amazingly enough. So I was asking at the very moment that the writer was asking for me, and Dave had left, and I wanted Batman, and they said, "You want it?" And I was like, "That's my book. Do not give it to anyone else."
Wow.
Yeah, and so to me it's like, it's just my time. I told Dan, I feel so good. I want to be drawing Batman for the next 5 years in some capacity, you know. It's a long run for me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm usually in and out of something, and I hopefully leave something meaningful behind. But, you know, I want to just draw Batman for a while. I looked at what Tony Daniel did. He just Batman for, God, how long was Tony Daniel drawing that? 20 years? I mean, a long time. You know, it's like, that's so cool. You know, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at now.
What is it particularly about Batman that you think that you can bring to it that's different? You know, something in his personality that you really connect to?
I don't connect to his personality. I'm not angry at all. I'm happy. You know, I really am. But I think it's all visual with me. I like to go back and I like to read Golden Age comics. You know, I don't know much about the Silver Age, and you know, I didn't read DC books through the 80s. I just go straight back to the 1930s and 40s, and that's kind of where I live. And so, you know, going back and reading Detective 27 and saying, you know, I think the thing is that Bob Kane intended for Bruce Wayne to really look a lot more like a bat than he does currently. Because the costume, when you look at it in 27, very primitively drawn Da Vinci-style bat wings that have turned into a cape. You know, down at the end. It's a long bed sheet, essentially.
Right.
Long bat ears, black, you know, have become little stubs. And he doesn't look like a bat anymore, at all, in my opinion. It's just the way the character has evolved. And you know, let's not forget the original intention of Bruce Wayne. Bruce said, "Father, I shall become a bat." And so he needs to look like a bat. One thing that really bothers me in superhero stuff are the lies. The lies. There are lies that happen. And what I mean by that is this. There's so many Batman things where you'll see villains that are, oh my God, you know, they're arrested by the police. A giant bat swooped in, and he doesn't look anything like a bat. You would never mistake, you know, the current Batman for a bat, ever. So it's a lie, you know, to me. You know, so the idea for me is to go back and say, okay, now what do I think Bob Kane meant? And Bob Kane meant for Batman to his first weapon, before the build, the heavy build that everybody loves to draw, and all the weapons, the first weapon is intimidation, fear. You have to see the glowing eyes, the long ears that look like the devil, and you need to see heavy bat wings, a cape floating down, okay? And then after you've, pissed your pants, then it's easier for him to beat up 10, 15 thugs because he's scared them all.
Right.
And I feel like the book's gotten away from that. Greg Capullo is bringing it back. We were having this conversation one time, and we were giving each other goosebumps about what Batman is about. Primary weapon, intimidation, fear. He needs to look like a bat, on first sight. So that's been my goal. And even way back when I was working on Batman Superman, I just said, okay, his cape, since occasionally I see it go and become bat wings, and then he can glide. Well, yeah, he's got a cape here, and then attached to it is structure like bat wings, and then like Da Vinci, it can fold out. It's got fingers like a bat and a thumb and everything, and he can grab the thumb if he wants, and then, and no other artist is doing that right now. Everybody's doing the cape.
Yeah.
But I think that's what Bob Kane meant.
Wow.
I could be wrong because he's dead, and I can't ask him except with a Ouija board, which I haven't tried yet. Not yet. We could try it here.
We could.
Bob Kane, am I doing it right?
Can we have a seance?
Yes.
Are we ready?
So that's my thing.
That's
that's
exciting.
primary one. It's very exciting. This is the great thing about this job is that, like I said, just you can talk to another creative person about this and just spook them. Just get them excited about it again. And you remember, it's like actually drawing the comics it can be drudgery. I mean, I'm in my office all day long. It's like I haven't seen the sun, and look at me. I look like milk right now, but. Because it's just work. It's hard work. This is actually doing it is less fun than talking about it and getting the ideas out.
Right.
So, Batman is just great. And the idea of his rogues gallery just slays me. Mad Hatter is the guy I'm working on now. Didn't give a crap about Mad Hatter. Greg Hurwitz, the writer, just said, "You want to do a 6-issue study on the Mad Hatter?" I'm like, "Yeah, but they're doing the Joker right now, and his face is cut off. And why can't we do that?" No, I want to do this thing with the Mad Hatter, Ethan. I think we need to, because they're doing that. We're going to do this. And I was like, "Oh God, patience, Jesus." And of course, the scripts have been great. And then I just got to take this character that nobody's had their eye on, and then just sort of make him visually interesting. And I said, let's think about like Timothy Leary and like Charles Manson, and let's make him a drug addict. Like he takes lysergic acid through his teas, and he hallucinates, and he gets wackier and wackier. Of course, he's obsessed with this girl, Alice D. Get it? LSD. And this whole Alice in Wonderland mystique, that he's trying to recapture this one perfect moment from his childhood. And Greg's written this story about him where it's so atypical. He was a weirdo and a nerd, but he wasn't beat up on. The other kids seemed to like him. His dad loved him and everything. He had a great family, and then something went wrong. So that's the story that we're telling right now.
Awesome.
And the Tweedles are hilarious. Anybody would want to draw the Tweedles.
All right, on the Tweedles, we're out of time.
Oh no.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. It was
Thanks.
fun.